Welcome. Hello. This is our little workshop run through of the project we've been working on. I guess, sort of seeing the rest of the conference, one of the more hands-on things. So there's also a bit of what kind of mindset we went into this. We said, okay, people are building a lot of different things. They're envisioning a lot of, half the talks have future in their name, right? So we're kind of thinking like the mindset we had with our products is how can we try things out as sort of applied as possible, and make something usable out of it. So that's basically what we will go over a little bit today. Let me see what slide is. This is the one-liner, right? So we will go over the background of it a little bit, but it's a self-publishing platform where people can own the content they publish, built on Ethereum and IPFS. Baris should tell me more about it. Then this is the kind of key values that we see that we can get from a platform, where traditionally, in editing there will be a lot of in content publishing there's a lot of editing and a lot of monitoring, and if you want to publish something yourself in the internet, this used to be one of the great things of the internet, but it over time moved again into centralization, and with things being free, also you selling other stuff for in order to be able to publish. So this is something that we are kind of reimagining with Pheme. And this is our team that we started doing this with. You will, as you know, Umar already. Umar is our other co-founder of the project, who is in New York, and we're also long distancing on the project. This is the mindset, and the icons got different. We just wanted to go over a bit of the background, and we do that in the little talks from each of us. One is more focused on the background and principles, the other one is more on the design and the user experience we try to bring. And then we have the sort of more practical session where we want to have you create an article and a handle, first a handle then an article, and then you kind of see where that ends up and how it's yours. And so that would be nice to do in a practical way. And now I'll hand it off to Baris, who will start off with a more background side.
It's like slightly technical, but it just explains how this works in a decentralized fashion and how no one owns, but things are just out there and you just navigate through it. So, do you know what Found is? So it was basically like a social bookmarking website. It has like crazy images in it, people curating it and publishing it or so. And it was sort of invite only, like people who are not like invited in can only browse it or so. And I really wanted to use that. But then it got closed on May, and I never got an invite, and that was like, fuck, this is really sad. So I'm never going to be able to see what's in it. And what they were doing is also getting lots of images over internet and basically saving it somewhere, even though the original content goes away. So as an example, you can find like really like weird images, like some curated like inspirational image collections or so, which do not exist in the Tumblr anymore, but they do exist in Pheme. But with Pheme's closure, everything was gone. I mean, never to be kind of accessible. And we also see similar stories such as like wine. So now they have a wine archive, they closed down the shop, you can access only popular wines, which who knows like what's popular depending on like their metrics. So we started to think about how to build a public publishing platform which the content can survive even if the owner decides to plug one day. And that's increasingly becoming like a problem, because like you get into a platform, you put some of your stuff and they shut down and all your stuff is gone. Because technically you don't own your content just sits in some sponsor's infrastructure, and once the sponsor pulls the plug, the content goes away. So we started to discuss what things are out there to build that. So we discovered there's this thing called IPFS, which is a decentralized file system, and the weird thing is it's immutable. If you put something in there and then change the content of it, the address changes as well. So the things are that once you put them, they are there. They have an ID, and you can always identify them. So we started to, okay, let's put some content into IPFS. And IPFS basically gives you an address of X. So we decided to say, okay, so let's assume I would like to have a blog. So I have different posts, multiple content. So that was Y and Z. So basically to kind of show my blog, I need to keep track of address X, Y, Z, every post I have. And then we decided, okay, let's make them point to each other so I can survive by just having the address X and then follow the address X along the way. So therefore I have a chain of posts, which is actually my blog. This really fits into the analogy of a feed or like a chain. But still, every time you post something, the address of it was changing. So we found this thing called IPNS. It was not really useful for us, although it kind of allowed our initial use case. So in IPNS, it was sort of like a DNS, which gives you like, you can have a name or like an address, which is always the same, but you can change where it points to. So as long as you, as soon as you add new content, you update the record, just like internet, then you can always access it. And then we figured out Ethereum, which basically allowed us to have Twitter handles like aliases, which we can point out to these chains. Therefore, anyone can easily like post content from their browsers without running like lots of weird programs or nodes or blockchains or anything. They don't have to deal with anything to interact with all this infrastructure. So we wrapped it with like a really dumb interface, and this became our first prototype, and it worked on a browser. Everyone had read-only access to the content you publish. So even though it's decentralized, nobody needs any sort of an extension or any like thing installed to read your content. You can copy paste the link to Twitter or Facebook or like the Web 2.0, and basically people in that platform would be able to access your content. But to write it, you will need some help. Like is basically simply you will need like an Ethereum like that browser, which can be either like a browser extension or maybe an app on your phone. So in the final iteration, we also started to work with pointers. So it's easier to modify the chain. As an example, you would like to remove or edit a particular content, then you just modify the pointer so you don't have to re-upload the content every time you make a change. So we created an abstraction, and this is how it kind of looks right now, infrastructure-wise. So this whole thing basically sits on Ethereum and IPFS. We don't own it, we just run some nodes to serve the content on Pheme, on IPFS, so it's available for other nodes as well. But technically infrastructure is not sponsored by us. And now this is how it looks like more or less. We were able to work with the front end of this to make it more usable. So we're solely focusing on making this easy to use, understandable and accessible by anyone. You don't need like lots of extensions or nodes or so to interact with this. And now Daniel's gonna show
Yes.
how we deal with
I'll
the UX.
move on with that side a little bit. So also kind of I will go over a little bit what the whole thing, how it looks and what it does as well functionally. Basically, one of the main parameters, as Baris said, is we were trying to figure out a way to have trying to find out a way to bring a experience to dApps that can feel non-technical. It can feel as non-technical as possible, so that people that don't choose not to interact with the Web3 side of things, that don't have to have a feeling of this is a difficult product to get or something like that. And this is an issue that I can sort of see that all dApps are facing, and I always love to look at whatever's going on here in terms of users and people using it, and this is also something all of these apps are also listing this as the biggest issue right now, with trying to come up with ways to make this non-technical, at least for as long as possible. This is also, I mean, a kind of a nice way of looking at that, there is in that sense two issues, like, because we of course have to onboard people on decentralization as a concept, and then there's the whole product side of things. But my approach, or our approach, was that the product side of things really does not have to be so difficult. There's a lot of things we can do and improve, and we are sort of also working on that. I mean, obviously, I'll go over all of these, but these are part of the issues that people are coming up with, like especially if you haven't interacted with any Web3 things before, like how do you this is a lot to wrap your head around. So that is, and I think part of the people will need to wrap their head around, because they will need to interact and post content. But if we're talking about the read-only side of things, just people consuming content that is there forever, immutable, they don't have to care about many of this stuff. There's a lot of good things starting to happen right now. So on coming up with actual design principles, on sort of how to deal with part of the elements, and so I don't want to reinvent all the wheel. A lot of very good article is this one from Belgium. He really described a lot of different aspects of dApp design. Basically, what I want to do right now is to go over our side of things. So, which is I'll hopefully show a little bit of the example of how we solved a few of these issues. This is kind of I wanted to write this down as an explicit thing as well, which is what we try to do all the time, is to make a user feel just comfortable to use this dApp, use as many existing paradigms of content reading and these kind of things that people are used to, if necessary, from the old web, so that you can make this transition quite nicely. I will. Well, okay, so this may be outlining the general challenges on the three levels that we kind of outline. First one is the general app principles, generating a familiar experience for people. If necessary, onboard them on Web3 principles. The reading aspect is this is one of the two main sort of aims of the platform. First one's reading. This is the read-only side. People can just consume content as much as they want, and then the writing aspect is the part where we need to onboard them on certain principles of how you deal with adding content to this, which also has to do with showing people value. So I'll get to that in a bit. And this is kind of the main outline of the design principles that we implemented. I will go over these examples a little bit, and they have to do, partly with very generic Web3 things in terms of letting a user know how they're connected to the platform, as well as things like writing experience, things that not necessarily have to do with Web3. First one is connection status. This is something we sort of thought about from the beginning, and we're kind of rethinking as well as the product iterates. But one thing is that if you want to know about what the content you're reading, where it's sitting, it's kind of useful to have this idea always, like, okay, how am I connected to the content that I'm reading, and if I want to react to it, for instance, what does that mean? So you could always also imagine in an old school way that you are reading this article and this is sitting on Medium server somewhere in Ireland or something like that. In this case, we could show people like, hey, you are now visiting in read-only mode, so you're connected via Infura to access this piece of content, or you are connected via Web3, which means they can interact with it as well. So this is something that will make user aware of how they are connected, but also progressively. Like, something we're doing now is to even de-emphasize this kind of information if you're not focused on it. So it's now just a little green dot, and then if you want to learn more about it, you can click it. The other thing is the onboarding. That is past read only already, but I wanted to kind of start with it because onboarding is such a big thing. This is something that people are like. This is becoming the famous 44 steps of being able to do anything with cryptocurrency and dApps. We just want to kind of boil this down to the smallest amount of information as possible and adopt general product design principles of talking to people in dApps. So we really sort of, at the moment someone gets to an interface where they need to do something and we want to explain them something, we kind of strip away everything else and we just focus on these kind of key 3 steps. What they need to do is, connect their wallet. In our case, now we have a temporary second step of switching to Robston, and then getting any test credits, which is in Robston case free. Asynchronous messages is also something we keep sort of revisiting, but from the beginning there was always a little bit of a time delays due to transactions and time that it needs to process. So we don't want to interrupt the user to do anything that takes they should wait. They should always be able to freely consume and browse content further. So what we do is we process things in the background, we let them move on, we let them know, like, hey, we're processing your stuff, don't worry, it's it's safe with us, or it's safe, wherever it's being processed. And then it's published, so you get a sort of notification on it in here. That's, this is kind of baked in almost every step that you do that requires some sort of transaction. And that doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a wait state. That's basically the thing. So we let people browse on. Then another one, which is kind of key and not necessarily related to Web3, but I wanted to mention it here. This is like we are spending a lot of time trying to figure out like how can we make a content and experience as comfortable as possible, using as much of sort of clean writing experience as we can, letting people focus on content as much as they want. And that is also trying to set a high standard for ourselves. Again, we're iterating on this all the time, but we don't let ourselves any excuses in terms of like, this is a technical prototype, it shouldn't appeal to users, something like that. This should work and this should be as comfortable or preferably more comfortable than any Web2 app. This is relating to the asynchronous thing that I mentioned before, but it's time weight management. Whenever someone has posted something or has done something, we let them know. So we have if they do an update to a post, for instance, we provide a little message on the bottom saying, okay, there's a newer version available. Don't worry, you can freely move away, and then or we refresh the page whenever the transaction has actually taken place. And yeah, so again, the user is informed that stuff is happening. This is the for me an interesting part, and we keep again rethinking this. But one key thing in here is the called sort of level of escalation of explaining people about how it works. So there's new principles involved here. There's how does Web3 work? How do I even connect? How do I create an account? How do I connect my wallet? All these things require explanation. We set up this kind of system where initially we provide an inline explanation. Like on the left, you tell them like, in order to create an account, you need to do this. One sentence, very brief. There's a Y button there. So you can, if you're like, what is this? I don't get it. You can click it. You get a little pop-up that it tells you a little bit more. It tells you like, this is how Web3 works. This is why we need to do it. So you can close it, so you're a little bit informed. And the last step is that if you still don't want to find out more and how does this whole thing work, you can go to our FAQ. I always imagine that at one point, if we have a support department, then there will be a support button there as the final escalation step. But kind of this is something I'm trying to bring into all steps that are potentially not familiar for people, so that they have different levels of finding out more. And this also means that in the beginning, you don't bother anyone with it, you kind of assume things. So for instance, users that are already onboarded are not bothered by it, it's just a little message, but then people that want to find out more, they can. So this is how that looks now, right? So publishing an article, this is telling them about the costs and about how it will take some time. And then they're like, okay, if they know about that, that's fine, you can click and publish. But then there's the Y button, you can move on, you get the little dialogue, you can see why these costs take place and these kind of things. Quite brief still. Then in Learn More, you can go to the frequently asked questions where we hopefully tell a bit more about the background. And this is also something we want to come up with a more friendly explanations, let's say. This is our first versions, the FAQ. So this is the kind of the thing, I mean, that's repeating what I just said, but basically, for people, like people can either already understand or they don't understand yet. If they don't understand, you have to go to the next step until the user is happy, kind of thing, right? That was our overview and explanation. Maybe some questions, interactions on what we've talked about so far. Thank you for listening, all of by the way, from the beginning of it.
I guess updating the article will cost me something too.
Exactly.
Yeah. We now, we're now on testnet, so it's kind of it's a nice little playground for us. People can freely get test ethers, so you can play around and it doesn't cost you anything. But yeah, anytime you would want to make a sort of modification of something that is permanent, you kind of pay for the server costs.
But I mean, the price is around cents, not even dollars.
Yeah, I'm just from a business perspective, I assume that looking at our company, when we publish a Medium article, most of the time we'll change something.
Yeah.
Or change stuff several times, and if you have like the payment hurdle every single time, it's like a turn to people, even if you only pay a cent.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, and I guess that's something we do want to make into a comfortable and possible experience. This was what Baris talked about with the pointer thing. So updating content should be possible, even though blockchain seems a little bit more immutable by nature, but we still allow for that as a system. But it's kind of that's something we are looking at now, what the eventual cost will be, for instance, but also can we potentially do a sort of grouping of transactions or something like that. Maybe you can have a meta transaction that you do, so you group that over time. There are potential ways to offset these costs, let's say, in a grouping way. But yeah, this is the initial iteration of how that works. Yeah.
But also, like, you kind of paying that cost initially kind of makes you the owner in that sense, right? Basically, if you do this thing over like a second layer or another or someone else's infrastructure or so, then you're actually, it's like a medium situation, but in a different sense, right? Still, that whole system is depending on that intermediary. So this is more about kind of removing intermediaries between you and the infrastructure, but you can put more later on. But in the end, this is something we're aware, and this is something we will have to eventually deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, as we see, like more and more people are working on like ways to onboard people easier, for instance, or to let people pay gas costs later and later in the process. That is something that is interesting to us as well. So you could say that as long as the user is just browsing around, for instance, or hasn't posted anything yet, they don't have to pay yet. Once they start posting an article, that can be a big step, and that can can be different ways of solving that over time. But it is it's something we are aware.
Yeah, I mean, I love the amount of thought that went into obviously thinking about the actual experience that that you're envisioning here to overcome some of those hurdles that come with thinking about decentralized apps and stuff like that. At the same time, like when I'm listening to the way you frame it, it makes me think that maybe yes, it is for archival purposes and ownership purposes, it makes a lot of sense. At the same time, I think there's like maybe another way of approaching it, another way of framing it, as in kind of like what you were saying, is that if you're removing the intermediary of a publisher who always have control over the content in kind of like an indirect or direct way, you're connecting the author directly with their reader, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that type of connection generally does not exist, because you're always connected through someone else,
right?
Publisher, book publisher, or medium, or whatever that is, and there's always some economic incentive for that third party. So now that you connect it directly the reader and the author, I suppose in that case, I think as well as usability, you're thinking about something a little bit different from usability that is, there's an opportunity for thinking about economic incentivization there,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
So it's less about like, I have a burning need to write something, but maybe it's, like you're the reader who's asking for something from your favorite writer or something, So, like, when I think about it like that, it just reminds me of like some attempts that people have made before for like trying to fund their favorite, investigative journalists, for example, right? I'm not saying that that's a solution necessarily, but it feels like there's an opportunity to investigate with that design mindset that you're looking at in terms of escalation, for example, right? Using that type of mindset for thinking about that economic incentivization for like what kind of new economic interaction you can establish between the reader and author that actually disrupts the existing system as well as the actual usability of the platform itself.
So tech-wise, actually, so this is the building block, right? So if you kind of allow this type of content being creating and being accessible by anyone by interacting with the protocols directly without our interface is an intermediary, anyone can actually propose such a thing, right? Like, not all of the incentives has to be built into the core layer, but they can be extensions of it. So as an example, this content right now lives in a decentralized way. So you can build something else which talks with the same protocol, basically being able to access to the same content, but you can build all the incentives into it. You can completely twist it in another way. Let's assume we're only writing right now, but 6 months later we're gonna add support for uploading sound or so. Then maybe you can build some sort of like a SoundCloud-ish thing for yourself, or since identities are based on Ethereum, you can also pay someone. It's really straightforward. So this is why this thing feels really basic, because we really start, okay, like this is our core use case. Let's build something which we can, deal with this problem of onboarding, content creation, and as it gets more mature, then think about possible extensions of it through incentives or some other layers. As an example, like, self-publishing is a part of it, but what about like a bunch of people would like to publish together? How can we create a system for them where they can use the system, like they can basically store their content decentralized, but also act as a collective or a federation in that sense. So these are all possible extensions of this core use case, which we're also thinking right now.
Yeah, I mean, we will have like get to that in a little bit as well, but like I'll just skip to the slide for now, because this is the top of the feature list. We're actually designing this feature right now, the fact of endorsing content in a way. So we kind of want to rethink this traditional idea of just sort of clapping or liking anything, but just if it's about this micro level, then being able to say like, yes, I support this article, for instance, like that. It's one of the most interesting ways in actually to reverse this whole potential problem that might also relate to what you were asking about before. Suddenly, instead of saying like, oh, I have to pay, it's suddenly the opportunity of, hey, I can get direct repayment, for whatever I post as content. So yeah, it's something we're actively working on at this moment, actually.
I mean, as an example, endorsements is a really interesting thing, I mean, in that sense, because right now, if you're like publishing on a platform, you have this really super low cost interactions, like the mediums clap, like you can clap 1,000 times or so.
50
that kind of puts it in like a bit like meaningless. But if you kind of increase the cost significantly to endorse something, and you would like to give the opportunity to the user to kind of contribute to the author, then it's a different thing. So I mean, the Web 2.0 is full of these like really low cost interactions where people really don't care when they like, clap, or so. What if we try to build something more meaningful where people kind of think a bit more before acting on a thing? So like that's why I'm kind of thinking about like endorsement is like the first thing we would like to build, where the reader can directly connect with the author. And as an example, as reader wants to interact with this whole system, then the onboarding process becomes a crucial part of the reader's journey as well. Because if it's like in the case of this read-only journey, you just get a link, you go there, somehow you connect to the infrastructure and you see the article. But after you would like to do something over the article, such as like endorse the article, pay like a tip to the author or so, then the user needs to be onboarded as well. So overall, like this core problem becomes even bigger. That's why we're kind of trying to tackle with it early as much as we can and try to scale that approach in various other ways.
Have you started looking into verifications for copyright purposes? Because
so-
the way I see is probably one of the most interesting uses is that I claim copyright
Yeah.
from an immutable text they stored on Ethereum, right?
So the thing is, it's not just copyright in that sense, all sort of like, I don't know, like hate speech, illegal stuff. I mean, we know all of these exists on internet, right? But when they become a problem is when they become visible. And the visibility is like achieved through like really public platforms, such as like big publishing platforms or like any sort of a forum or like search engines or so. So in the sense that this is decentralized, you basically talk with the system through some sort of like public gateways. In our case, it's our web page, which basically talks with Ethereum and IPFS. We don't have a backend server serving any of this. What we can do is just like let's assume we receive like a letter from the court. There is like a copyright violation or there is a hate speech in it. What we will do is we will basically hide this content, not hide, but we will mask this content from the public gateway and put instructions to set up your own nodes or talk with the protocol directly. This is all your responsibility at that moment. Like, we try to make this visible for everyone, but we're having some troubles, but you can still access to this content without us as an intermediary. So we're trying to kind of come up with this sort of a solution for that problem. But as an example, for now, for such a small thing, it's not a problem. But as we bump into the first wall, we'll try to work around it.
GDPR was my second question.
The thing is, we don't have any data collection.
Of course, but still, I mean, you have to blacklist if somebody writes you an email. This is
Exactly.
mandatory throughout Europe. But this is a second question. Blacklisting is not too complicated, and once you've done it, you're not liable anymore for any GDPR actions. The question was for self-publishing reasons, have you started partnership, have you started working with identity management, like certification of identity on the blockchain? They can certify the me, that Kamfora, as published something on this platform that I can claim later that was my copyright at that specific time. That was my question. Have you started working with personal identity management certification platform?
I mean, not yet. Like right now, we don't even actually sign the content. We push the IPFS. The first step, which we're going to implement soon, is basically everything you put onto IPFS will be signed with your private key, so anyone can validate it. But I mean, depending on possibilities, why not? But for our use case right now, do you really need to really authenticate things, like as long as you can, like with a signature, prove that it's you? Maybe it's usable, but maybe in some cases having such an identity is a bad thing. So I come from Turkey, and in Turkey the government kind of hunts for you, right? So actually this is much better in that sense. They don't know who I am. Like, sure, they can maybe trace all the transactions I run on Ethereum or so, but there are ways to tackle with that as well. But as this thing is really small right now, this is a possibility which we can explore in the future.
And I guess this is where the two layers become also interesting. The fact that we have the protocol and storage level where the content is as is, it's unmoderated. It's one thing that is accessible to anyone. But Pheme can act as a layer on top of that does provide a nice filter, a family safe thing, and possibly things like verifications as well. So we're exploring that kind of separation for that reason as well.
I mean, as long as the author writes the content, then how the content is being like accessed and made visible is where you need to kind of think about generating a value or generating an income at all. Like, you can build maybe incentives around it to build your own moderation system on it, so it kind of has a family-friendly version which works with certain incentives or so. But I mean, the first problem is to getting thing out there, and there aren't many like easy ways of doing it in a user-friendly way.
Any other questions at this point, or can we move to the active part of this? No questions, right? We would come. Because one thing we would love to do, that's why also it would be nice that we, it has sort of two parts to this session, is well, also for those that came later that didn't get the intro, we did a little bit of an overview of Pheme as a publishing platform right now. And one thing we would love to do also is kind of demonstrate and let you interact with it directly. Doesn't matter if you already have, like Web3 connectivity or not. And then, so we kind of go through that together, register a handle, publish some content. If you really want, you can always unpublish it later. And then we see where the results end up. So this would kind of be a nice way to sort of move through these motions. You can do it with your laptop or with your phone. I think laptop is nicer, right?
Yeah, because phone has some issues, right?
Phone has some issues right now. So if you have a laptop, it's kind of nice. And we would like to kind of do this together. So it could be nice if we can, if you just want to walk through it. It's going to be quite short, I guess. So it's just nice to see it hands-on, which is also for us one of the main things to show how the platform kind of works. So that's where the is. Where is it? Ah, yeah, yes. So yeah, okay. There's some laptops here and there. The easiest way, if we go to aloha.pheme.app. This is the current alpha version. I mean, it will be on Pheme.app later. And yeah, if you feel like it, just load it up, have a look. You come to the main page there, so you can see that. Should I just do it with them? It's kind of nice, right? Yeah, if you have your browser art, nice. Oh, we get to that stuff even later, isn't it? Alright. There we have it, aloha.pheme.app. Hey, wow, there's all new posts. I've seen today. Everybody got that? Yeah, I mean, that should be the easy part. So now, okay, just by show of hands, who has who has got MetaMask or anything installed? Who's Web3 connected right now? If you have it loaded up, one, just the one. Okay, that's nice. That's actually the two. You've got
yeah, but I can't connect right now.
Internet-wise or?
No, I have to update MetaMask.
Okay. Oh, that's also nice. We can see what kind of how that gets handled in Pheme. And a few of you also don't have it yet. So what we can do, let's do it all together. Go to create your alias as the the main thing for getting into new content. And if you don't have your wallet installed yet, this would be a point you will get to the first step, which is the wallet. Obviously, since Baris has it, it's installed.
Try opening the code.
I'll do Incognito Window. There it is. So now we have to connect to wallet, right? This is the next step that we offer it. Maybe we can do that if needed. You go to MetaMask, but if you're on your phone, you said you already connected. You have still got to do MetaMask. Is that right? You have the laptop.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Yes.
You're doing MetaMask. Yeah, I'm just curious how this will go, right? So we'll do sort of hands-on process. You're already connected on your phone. You got MetaMask. Okay, that's nice. So you're connected. That's what it says. Yeah. Oh, even you're already on Robson. That's easy. Yeah. Let's see. Do you have MetaMask on it?
No, I only own Bitcoin.
Okay. No, it doesn't matter. You don't need to own any Ether right now, and we're not connecting. You don't have to connect your own wallet.
Okay.
So it's just for testing purposes.
I mean, since the thing is still like a work in progress, we run it on Robston testnet, and there are lots of faucets which you can like get free test ethers.
So that's the nice thing. You will get to that in the last step. So let's all make sure that we got into either MetaMask, or if you're on your phone, which is no one. What was it? You use Status now, did it?
Status or Cypher.
Status or Cypher. But okay, let's get on the phone. Let's do it on. Let's continue on laptop. I think it's the nicest way. I'll need maybe a few seconds for doing that. Is it all installed? Yes, MetaMask? Not yet. Should I wait, or
It's
can...
not connecting to it for me.
It's not connecting?
It's trying to update.
Ah, okay. Could be. Oh yeah, that's. I think if you click the spinner there, you can actually switch to Robston. You can already do that. Yeah, it's a weird interface. Okay. So if you have installed MetaMask, you don't have to do necessarily anything yet, but you can just go refresh the page that you're at. So in our case, we will have MetaMask, so now I'll continue. If you're in MetaMask, then you can either create a new account or use your existing account. But what the platform will ask you in the second step is to switch to the Robston network. So you're already on it. Are you on Robston, all of it? Robston.
I'm writing down my.
Okay. Oh yeah. Private key stuff.
Yes.
I mean that's really weird actually. They recently changed some, they recently changed their onboarding as an example. MetaMask.
Yeah.
It was a 3 or 4 step thing, and now it's like tens of steps.
I'm
Like
clicking.
that's
my
the hard.
demonic
Like
words,
every time
but-
I do it, I feel really bad.
Let's have a quick look. Is it like you're going through the onboarding steps there?
Yeah,
Or?
exactly. So wait, how do I switch to?
Oh, you're there.
No.
Okay, you're there. Yeah, if you now go back to the Pheme. Oh yeah, I can switch to Robston there.
Yeah.
All right. You're on Robston as well, and you're Robston. Okay, cool. All on Robston. Now, yeah, if you already have an account on Robston, that's easy. But if not, that's also no problem. If you refresh or you get to this this page, the same page that we were already, you now get to the third step, where you can get test credits. Do we get there?
Yeah.
Do we see the test credits button?
We do.
Yes. Okay. Because the nice thing about this test credit thing, it's just one button click, literally.
There is an issue.
Didn't work. Yeah.
Oh, there was an issue with Faucet, right?
Yeah, sometimes like forces create some issues, but like we can. Oh, this is the old one. Where was
Oh,
it?
the link was wrong.
Yeah, we fixed it, but not released yet.
Oh, that was the issue.
So actually, this is the thing where you can get like a.
Okay. So what we do, everyone, if we can go to faucet.metamask.io and get the test either from there. It's the same button click, but we have to update that link. Right?
Yeah.
And that will take a few seconds.
Or
Is it?
minute.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
RPC error.
Ooh. RPC. Wait, in the console, are you getting it?
It just pastes it at the bottom of the screen.
See? Oh wow.
I can try with a different
Faucet is
browser.
broken, I guess.
So Robston recently had a hard fork, and some of the faucets and infrastructure is not there yet. And this is part of like working on a testnet. But we can easily send you test ethers if the faucet is completely broken.
Do we have another way of getting ether now?
That's a great question. The
no.
state of where
What you can do is you can send an email with your address
to you, and then you will send the ether.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that can work. So you need ether still for the?
No, I have.
Oh, you have ether. Okay.
I never saw that screen.
So test ether.
I mean, the thing is, the
Okay.
onboarding kind of tries to understand
Are
the
you-
state you're in,
MetaMask
and
cannot
basically
use it
customizes,
now,
like,
and
brings you to the right step. So you only see what you need to do.
Ah, okay. Okay.
Right.
Is that something you can do, or you can?
The interface is not really intuitive. So.
Yeah. we're dealing with that issue as well. Let's see. You can also do it on your phone and then see how that works.
Or there are like browsers which this thing is built in, such as Opera or Brave.
Also possible. Gotta tell people to download Opera browser.
Yeah, of course.
You were saying you didn't get to the.
I just sent you an email.
Oh wait. You're in. Okay, so you were you already had the ether set up and you were in Robston. Okay, nice. Okay, well that's good. So you're getting there. Nice. I guess you joined us later. Thanks for joining us. We're doing a little sort of interactive session of posting some content on Pheme. We did a little explanation on how it works. So now, if you feel like joining and seeing how this sort of how that goes and where your content adds up, it's all testnet, so don't worry about that. But if you feel like you can join, it's also on your phone. If you feel like. Did you get through or?
No.
Same error. So okay. So for everyone that didn't that the ether link is broken, that should be the easiest step. That's interesting. Okay. So for everyone that had the broken ether link, Baris, can you show the email address again? I think that's going to be the simplest way. If you can. And what should they send to it?
Email.
Yeah, but what should they put in the email?
Their address.
The wallet address.
Did you get mine?
Actually, not yet. Oh, sorry. I bought the email address wrong. Damn it. Sorry.
I just sent a very suspicious email to someone else then.
I think
Nah,
we'll
the
get
domain is ours, so either way,
we'll get all the
ends
email.
up here.
Well, you can always send people your public address, you know. Feel free to send me
Send
It's like
ethers.
Send ethers now.
Yes.
That will end up in spam directly, you know.
Yeah, I would hope so.
So basically, this is like the most problematic part, where like the user needs to connect to Web3 in a way that they can interact with it, write something into it. As an example, this is just the testnet case. So in a case where this is on the main net, this is where the user needs to load some credit, and that's not an easy thing to kind of convince someone to kind of do that. So these are also the questions we will need to eventually answer, and this is just like a staging area where we're kind of exercising, okay, how do we deal with that? Even going through this, like installing stuff, getting ethers or so, this is hard as well. And this is probably like the biggest problem on top of this adoption thing, onboarding. Yeah.
This is our challenge for today. If we can get this group, you know, with willing people to complete these steps, it's a good user test. So are we doing are you all sending an email for ethers?
I just got a.
Wrong domain maybe?
I got bounced. DCNTRZLZ. DCNT.
RLZ.
DCNTR. Fuck, that's difficult. No, that's right. Baris at decent.
Where
With
is
the G. Baris G.
Baris G.
That's
So see, even email is hard.
In the meantime, I don't know if you discussed it before I walked in, but what's the plan for this atlas?
So the thing is, since everything is public, right? Everyone can interact with everything, like everyone can see and read what's out there. What you can do is you can put it into somewhere, and then you can make it queryable. You can put it in, like you can pull the whole thing, filter it, search it, or whatever. So this is the interesting part actually. If you kind of make everything available in an infrastructure which is public, then the additional value can be created by third parties. So as an example, Atlas is a thing where we're trying to say, okay, let's put everything into a place where we can query them, where we can filter them. So maybe we can put some sort of an additional value on it. Like what if we put server-side rendering into this so the server can return some stuff. So as an example, if you publish this article on Twitter, it shows all the metadata and fancy stuff in it. Because right now, as a client, you access to it. So there is this core thing where you write and read, and there are all this additional stuff which you can put around, which can be search, all the small stuff can be based around performance or incentives or an economic model or so. So in Atlas, we basically dump everything into take a copy of it as like JSON files, put it into like a Google Cloud bucket, and then we can query them with SQL.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is. But it's just like, how do we take these snapshots or so? As an example, can we use the system so some people can say, I would like to mirror everything under that handle. Because right now we are also mirroring some part of it ourselves, so it's accessible to everyone. The problem with IPFS is it doesn't bring persistence, it brings immutability. So persistence is an open question, which can be, as an example, solved by incentives built on top of this. But like making things extendable in a way that like anyone can build their own incentive, I think it's the more interesting part. I mean, we don't come up with a way, okay, so this is the way to go. Anyone can pick their own.
Question?
Sure.
How are we doing?
I'm not getting any emails.
Yeah, sorry, I just got distracted.
No worries.
There you go. Should have one now.
So everybody got to the third step, right? We're having, or maybe you join us a bit later, but we're doing an interactive session of trying to show the Pheme platform to everyone by posting yourself, and we can see where that data ends up. Would you like to join us to see how it works?
Yeah, actually.
Okay. I'll show you because if you go to aloha.pheme.app, Baris, can you bring back that slide? There it is. That's the address. And click the register, or click create an account, create your alias button.
Yes.
This one create.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, alright, and then there's some steps. We went over the background a little bit earlier, but you can see the steps that works. Do you already have a Web3 MetaMask in your browser or not yet? Okay. That's a nice. This is a good challenge. That's what we're trying to solve, right? So you can see how it what it will tell you. That's the way. So you would need to connect, get to a browser that has a MetaMask, or open it in Chrome, for instance.
You should receive your test ethers.
Does it create a subdomains?
Not
Now,
yet,
I guess.
but it's on a roadmap basically, because right now it's pheme.app / the domain name, the handle name.
Okay.
Later on, we're thinking of the subdomain thing as well. So you got through and you've got test ether now as well, right?
Yeah.
Or you got ether at least. Yeah, nice. Okay, great. Worked for you. Great.
Yeah.
All right. More people with test ether. Anybody else still stuck at this point or don't have ethers yet? That's this one. Get there. This is good. And you have the browser window open. Are you still waiting for?
I mean, I could send test ethers to anyone who needs it.
one thing we can do, Boris, if I can connect my laptop and you can keep an eye on the email,
Sure.
I will walk through, because then we'll move on to the content part. I'm very curious. That's the exciting part, I guess. No, I need the converter.
No, you need this one, not that.
Not that one. Let's see it as we can. Alright, so let me create a new account here. Just for showing it. Okay, create your alias. Okay, so we're on this ether side. This won't work for me either. Oh, maybe yes, it will. So usually our test ether step is the part that was the easiest, and now things change and we have to roll with it. That's how it goes. But if you all got to create an account, then you hopefully get to the account screen. Let me show that here. Or should I probably do it here? Let's just have to wait.
So the faucet is working.
In this case, it was working. I have to count to 13.
Now the faucet is working.
Ah, interesting. Coming and going, I guess. Well, it's working, but it's super slow, so it's not coming in. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna just show it on my existing account. Go to the account screen. Yes. So everybody got to this page now with the test ether? I guess people maybe already passed that.
Getting there.
Getting there? Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Sorry, you were.
All good.
What stage are you at?
Oh
yeah.
Creating the meta.
Ooh, yeah, meta. This is a fun stage. Reading all the terms of use. It'll be fun. Reading is important. Alright, you also. Oh, okay. You published as well, or did you? Are you previewing?
Preview.
Okay.
When I'm waiting for the username creation,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see something. I thinking it was wrong because it was all statics,
Yeah.
and so I sort of expecting something
Yeah.
turning
Yeah.
somewhere.
That's
Just
a
feedback.
great point, and also something we actually. I mean, we are
Because
pushing a deploy.
I was looking for this and I see do not see.
Yeah, it wasn't spinning. Let's say kind of thing. Yeah. We're.
But
That's a great feedback, Kevin.
but at the end I see that it's successful.
Right. This
I was surprised.
some
to see.
patience. So.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great. We actually are solving this right now, so it's a thing that works. What could be nice if we all get to the stage where we publish, because then we can look at where the published post ends up in a bit, right?
Yeah, sure.
That would be nice. But give a few more minutes maybe. Backing up phrases and all is also a thing. Okay. Let's see if we can see the new posts appear already. So people got to the publishing your post screen. I think you got to that, right?
Yeah.
You're there. But you didn't click publish yet. Is that true?
I haven't clicked publish.
Okay. Yeah. So what we can do is that let's move to that. Okay, you see it?
But maybe it's not on Infura. It's on, or it's actually on the other platform. I don't know.
What do you mean? Yeah, but
It needs to be spread all over.
I published an article and
I can see.
Okay.
you can see.
Yeah, actually, he was quite old for some reason.
yeah,
Maybe try comment up.
yeah. I'm doing 5 refreshes. So the stuff is going on. There's 2. There's 1 published.
This might be.
It's not necessarily bad. So you can try open new incognito, see if it's about the cache.
Oh, yeah, sure.
This is just nice to monitor kind of what's coming in. I have my caching set up in the right way. So anyone that has got to the article page, feel free to go and click post. You can also see how that works. Now it comes up. Nice. You can see also how this sort of flow works in that sense, because we, when you start writing an article, that's one thing, and you're all nicely writing away. But then, of course, when you post, that's the moment where you do some payment. So that's why we also included this kind of preview mode, where you can see what you have written, how it looks in the final version, before you actually click post. So that's something we can get to. In terms of content, we really didn't focus on that part in terms of what to write, but at this point we're testing, right?
Yeah.
So you can write however you feel like. Feel free to introduce yourself. Feel free to write about what the experience on Web3 is so far, or it could actually be nice to write what you are working on as a thing, or write a short description of that. It'd be interesting to get a few test posts like that. How's it going? Yeah, you got to that.
Okay, no.
Did you click the ether button on Pheme? So if you go back to Pheme now.
Sorry, I did that already.
Yeah. Now we're so it's through. Yeah.
After I did, but then aborted basically.
Oh yeah, there is an issue now. So that's what we had before. Somehow this changed recently.
Okay. Yeah, but it didn't send me back to this.
What we can do is if you send a email to Baris with your public key of the MetaMask wallet.
Okay.
This is for us a great example of how it goes now.
Okay.
Usually it's a
so
one-click. This was the easiest part of our onboarding, but they changed something. in the
Stuff
platform.
as well, because
What about that?
Helen
Visitor
rejected it, so you can
Yeah,
actually still
we
use-
omit the change.
Yeah, we're using a system that is
because
not
the
working.
wallet, basically how
or
it works,
sort of
most
goes in and
these
out
wallets,
somehow.
Okay, then
in
it's
mobile as an
the
example, it's a
other
really
way.
blocking example. You either reject or you accept.
Yeah.
But in web
I
browsers,
get it.
they take
I
away.
get it.
But if you reject as an example, it will
Okay.
give
I
you
will
some
put the
feedback
email address
about
Ah, thanks.
That's interesting. I'm just saying, like from a user experience
it.
point of view,
It should
it,
give feedback about
or
that
you
point.
should give the option of like have a prompt or something.
That's something where the MetaMask thing, once you close it, sits as like an unread or unapproved transaction. They kind of get lost sometimes.
The MetaMask transaction? In the window.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's a great point. Oh, sorry. This is the email address? Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna try and make it bigger. And if you want to send your wallet address to that, then Baris will load it up. course, the writing session also is important.
You're checking this?
Yep, as soon as I get some.
We're just doing a writing session.
Yeah, no, I'm just watching it. I find it kind of neat.
We're basically waiting for. We're doing like demonstrating the platform from first hand, also being a bit of a user test.
Yeah, is it like a distributed medium kind of thing?
Yes, that's a nice one sentence. Definitely a great description. Yeah, we're working on a published platform that is on Ethereum and IPFS.
Awesome.
So as a way for people to own their own content. Yeah. So the register versus the storage, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and we have implemented sort of we're in the first version where we have the platform set up, and now we're doing a sort of collective writing session to publish articles. And now we'll go over where everybody has, if everybody has posted them, we'll go over where they ended up and how they're, yours, let's say. So that's the final stage.
Yeah, I'm increasingly interested in like how people are combining Ethereum and IPFS. Yeah, I think it's a great pair.
Yeah, for us, like it's something offers a layer of flexibility in terms of content types as well and stuff like that. So, right now it's mainly text and some images, but we'll support other things over time. And that's all, you can all, of course, do anything.
Well, text and images is like, that's key, right? Like that's a blog post.
Yeah, that's why we start with that. Let's say,
yeah. I don't think there's any urgency to, support, full video streaming.
No, all in time. Yeah, I think there are different platforms for that. In that sense.
Yeah.
No, but we're focusing also, the key thing is the writing experience as a way just for, this is where you start off with wanting to put anything online. So writing and a cover image, let's say, is where you start.
Nice, yeah.
One short question. Is this the public key?
I think you can easily find in MetaMask. Although it might be that you as well, but maybe say to MetaMask. Yeah, you copy that.
Okay, great.
That's the one. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm quite new to all that thing. I'm from Deutsche Welle Innovation, and we also do a lot of EU projects. So I wanted to see how a successful project is going.
Yeah, it's great. It will tell you a lot about the state of things. Of course, because we are on testnet, we are working with these kind of issues.
Just one question. It's in a Google environment. So.
Not necessarily.
Okay. So the front end is actually sits on Google right now, but soon we will publish it on IPFS as well. So you can actually use any sort of a node to access this thing in a decentralized way. We don't kind of have any servers to host or serve this content, so we don't really need Google or Facebook to exist, or anyone.
I'm just asking because we now discussing whether we as like open source European funded project should probably ditch altogether all the Google platforms and things in our operation mode. It's just a discussion and it's not decided yet because we also have Google DNI projects. Then we of course cannot say like, hey, we're not working with Google because we're getting funded by them. But it's like some of a discussion like, should we as European projects switch to some European ecosystems at all? Or open source ecosystems?
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking, because for me it was like, okay, this is something on decentralization and privacy and whatever, but still uses the components of Google, which for me personally is absolutely fine, but just
right now no, but we're working on a solution on it, so you're going to be able to customize URLs as well.
On that,
you can share the URL with anyone, like a Pheme. You can
hear more companies and more organizations thinking.
So, like as an example, if you
can offer a sort of stack of products that are usable, that are decentralized and stuff, I think many people are already open to that mindset. If we can tackle many of the sort of current product and usability issues, part of which we're facing right now even, right? So these kind of things, if we can tackle that to a certain extent, then I think that's the main obstruction right now for getting that kind of adoption.
Yeah.
So that's what we are trying to solve constantly.
Yeah.
And part of the steps that we're doing now are, like I said, because we are on testnet, of course. But you know, that's still there.
Can I provide some feedback?
Of course.
I will need to leave soon.
Yeah, sure.
I have some notes here. It's the work is great. Congratulations. I think every Web3 project, in terms of user experience, they have common problems, which is also present here. For me personally, as a user, for example, for this particular case, maybe you need the testnet the whole time because the user doesn't know what they are doing. They are doing for the first time. Like now I'm creating an article. I don't know what's gonna happen, and I will pay for it, right? Maybe there should always be the testnet present. Right now your app looks like it's gonna go on mainnet, and that will be the final thing, right? You understand?
Right, yeah, definitely. That's a good point.
And about the user interactions, there's always a problem because there's a delay of getting feedback. Should you wait? Should you block users' interactions in the interface or not? For example, when I was registering for the first time, because of the delay, I couldn't get what's happening, and I clicked the create alias button twice, and it created another task in the application.
That's an interesting point as well.
And the other note I have is about privacy. I'm using my wallet to subscribe to your site, and that wallet has my financial transaction information. I would never do that. I would create another account and log into this system because I don't want people who will be reading my article to be aware of my financial transactions.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. That's another issue. That's a common issue.
So you
about these things.
You were thinking that people would get information on your data.
Why am I revealing that information? I already created an alias. So if I'm known as Cenk in this platform, I want to be known as that.
Yeah.
Or not create an alias at all and be the address, like the anonymous guy.
Yeah. Is that? I'm just gonna pull it up. Are you talking about the address that's shown on the page?
The author name, like handle.
Yeah, exactly. No, I just wanted to focus on this
so
thing.
here, when you click info, you can see my address, and you can go to Etherscan and see my other transactions. Right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that to happen.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And
write this down as well. I think the point you bring up on creating another account also is an interesting mindset. Not everyone will even have that. If you say, okay, I want to create another account for those kind of things and another account for my own financial transactions, that could be
would
fine.
create other problems, which I will use accounts on other services. Then I will create more wallets, more accounts, which will create a big problem for me.
It complicates things. That's true.
Then I will use maybe I will forget the password, whatever. My life will get complicated. I don't want that.
Right.
And your product's main power when I look at it is getting past censorship. Maybe there should be a voicing. Underlining that feature in terms of product fitting.
No, that's a great point. Right now we focused a lot on the product and the product experience, in terms of getting the functions to work, part of which would work, part of which don't.
Then the question comes: why am I publishing on blockchain?
Right.
I can use Medium, WordPress, or whatever systems you like that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great point. We haven't focused on that much.
And one technical thing about the user interaction and things, when you do something, take an action,
Yeah.
you should see it on, you should see the change on the interface immediately, and I
Like
should
where,
know
for example?
what's happening. Like
Mhm.
why am I waiting? I know that I will wait.
Like where, for example? Could you name?
The notifications
Mhm.
that line up.
Right.
Uh,
The thing in here, right?
mhm.
I
I
don't.
mean, it's a simple thing, but when you edit the article, when you are on the main page, that should update because I updated the article
Yeah.
already.
You know, it's very true. I think that's definitely one category of bugs, but that is great.
Yeah, that's
Great
not
point.
an
Yeah.
important issue.
Yeah. Alright. How are we doing on the posting, on the writing? Everybody's in writing mode, I guess, as well.
Okay, it creates your alias.
Yeah.
So there's like just a password, not password, a username or something like
Yeah.
that. Okay. Hmm.
Oh, nice. You managed to update the article again? I guess, Jack, or not? I saw you were like, it had a different title before?
Yes.
Okay. It's going well. Is the second post also from this morning, boys? No. The first, like on the right.
That's from early this morning.
Right. Oh, not from now.
Yeah.
Okay, we're getting. Let's do 5 more minutes or something like that. A few more minutes, and then let's everybody try to get the post published. And what we can just do is do a few minutes of reviewing what has happened, let's say. Also getting any questions that you might have further before we kind of wrap up the session. If you want to keep writing, I think that's always great, but then, you know, I would say we do it after the session. You can
Are
always
we
edit
using
and
the
update
main
the post. Sorry?
Are we on the main net?
No, it's
Not
just
yet.
that.
Which one?
Robson.
We're on Robson.
Did you load it up before? Are you connected? Oh, you got MetaMask? Yeah, okay. Oh, that's nice. Here's how it will go as an
Yeah, I
experience.
tried it before, but I'm not sure.
Mm.
So testing here.
Let's see if the faucet works. Oh yeah, it works. It's very buggy.
Robson was broken, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, like some faucets and some applications are, is like a Coinbase wallet. Robson doesn't work at all right now
Really?
because they're on the wrong chain.
You have to create an alias here.
Yes, that's what we're doing in the session. If you want to post something, you have to create it.
I got 2 questions.
Feel
First
free,
of all,
please.
can I later change that name?
Good question.
Or should
No,
I?
not at this point.
Okay.
But you can create multiple accounts.
Okay. Second question, it asks me to pay something, so what's about it? And I don't have a
Right. So what you just did is setting up the MetaMask account,
Okay,
right?
Yes.
So that basically is your wallet then.
Okay. But it's not connected to any monetary something.
Correct.
entity.
At this moment, we're using Robson, which is a test network.
Okay.
So it is indeed not connected.
Okay.
So that will that means that, you know, the ethers are fake, are not related to monetary value.
Okay. So then.
It works the same, but it's not in.
Okay. So okay. I see.
So yeah, you're totally right. Like in this case, you would pay not this amount. By the way, it will be way lower.
Okay.
But you would pay a few cents.
Okay.
But right now we're doing testing.
Okay.
It won't cost you anything.
But it just shows how much it would work. And
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, and it's
Okay.
very valid point. So let's see how it
Cool.
goes. Yeah. So this is 1, 2,
the right text? Yeah. Okay. Okay. And now I can. No stories yet, so now I can do something already.
That's a good point. This is where we have we had some issues with how it shows. It's processing now, right? So it's something that takes a few seconds. But one thing, if you take a note of it, we have to hide the right, show and hide the right button. Okay. Time is almost up. I think we'd like to bring it back. Bring it back a little bit. Are you? Did you bench post? So post you? Did you image post as well? All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Image got messed up. It's okay.
Ah, okay. All right.
I did say it'll post, but is it okay?
That's interesting. Did you get the MetaMask notification? Like the MetaMask little window?
For this one? See again.
I guess you got it for the account because you.
It's unlocked.
Ah, I see this.
Here. Here. They all confirm. Maybe.
It's an interesting case. So the MetaMask was locked, and then nothing happened.
So, first of all, it was unlocked. I closed the window, opened it again,
Mm-hmm.
and then that was unlocked. Locked by them.
Interesting.
That's the case.
Right.
Then session changes the case for the MetaMask. But it's not reflected here.
Well, the post is saved on the local storage, so you could go ahead and refresh. Yeah.
Should I refresh it?
Yeah. So we have a sort of automatic draft function like that.
Nice.
So if you do preview again, see if that works.
Okay, now I can publish.
Let's see. Window should pop up.
Get a signature.
Did you manage to publish? Ah, okay, great. Great. How's it going? So,
I'm so.
Interesting. I didn't refresh. It's also a bug.
It's a bug. Okay.
Yeah. Because now, if we can we go to MetaMask icon there? What does it say there? It says something German, right? Or not? The red text?
Unknown function fehlgeschlagen is failed.
Ah, interesting.
So something's failed.
Ah. Transaction failed. So maybe
transaction failed. Okay.
maybe you can click it again. We can try to register. Now we try it again. It was probably because earlier on the
Register.
MetaMask account. Yeah. I think it didn't happen.
You successfully registered your alias.
Yeah, it's funny that it says it here, but not in the other account.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
See you. Ciao.
So apparently no publishing for me.
No, I think, I mean, we can always do it later. Let's see if it comes through in the time that we review
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Because then it's interesting. That
So
it's,
now
now it is.
I'll just briefly show what kind of happens once you publish. So to do that, right now I'm gonna use the smart contract source code, but soon we're gonna open it and we can also share it if you want. Basically, talk with the infrastructure directly to see what's going on. I can plug it directly.
Oh, you don't need that. Let's see.
So I cannot get a credit for a new account at the moment. Is that okay?
Is that what it says, or?
I changed my account
Mm-hmm.
on Rockstand.
What is
I
it?
just created a new account basically.
Yeah, we had some issues with deposits. So.
So
Yeah, that's
I had
Is that normal?
source code of my contract, which is basically like a really simple contract which stores which handle has the which pointer in it, and it has a couple of functions such as deregister, register, set the owner, set the pointer, set the profile, or transfer ownership or so. So in this case, I'll basically try to see what's going on with our own handle. So let's try to see how this works. So I basically check here what is the pointer of this handle. So it gives me an IPFS address which I can basically so basically this is the pointer of the content. So if we go to the thing, so it says sprint 3, the type of markdown, cover image address, original small large, and there's a small extra which is pointing out to this one. So and it also has a previous one. So what I can do is basically check what's inside the previous one. So all our interface does is actually orchestrating this. So we don't have some sort of like a new protocol to do this, but we just orchestrate them to work together. So this now shows the second one. And if I check the previous, then it's the third one. And third one doesn't have a previous, and that's where our chain ends. And all of these things are stored on IPFS. Anyone can, as soon as we like release the source code of this, anyone can basically write their own crawlers, access and interact with this directly. As an example, you can modify this in a way that it's not incompatible with our interface, and then we will have to figure out what happens. But that's like with all standards, like if you put out like an RSS like feed which is not compatible with the standard, clients deal with it differently. But that's how we started this thing. Yeah.
A quick question, which maybe you mentioned earlier in the session. Why do you do you keep these list of posts in a contract in an array, or they are chained together? You said, but
so we only keep the first post's address, and the first post points out to the second and third or so. So it's like a stack. As you have more posts, they are on top of each other. And like you only have to keep track of the last one, so you can see the whole thing.
yeah.
So therefore, the gas costs are low because we only have to keep the last post address. I mean, we can keep the whole thing in the blockchain as well. Why not? But then the gas cost would be high, and it's going to be hard, like tougher on users to kind of actually create some content.
So you
or
keep
so.
the chain in on IPFS. That's what I understand.
Exactly. So we have a content chain on IPFS, and we have a pointer in Ethereum which points up, check this stuff out there. And we kind of developed this in a way that maybe eventually we can have multiple storage layers working together, because you don't have to use IPFS. You can use Swarm, you can use your own solution. I mean, why not? You can use AWS if you want. That would be kind of against how it works, but technically it allows it. Or right now, the registry we have works on Ethereum, but we can move it to other blockchains. We can move it to private blockchains. You can completely have something private, but just use the protocol. So actually, Pheme is 2 layers. We have a way of utilizing things, like a protocol over protocols, and we have an interface. And our goal is eventually to move the protocol part out and make it public, so anyone can work with it or implement it for their own tools.
Yeah.
So more or less, this is how it works. If you wanna have access to any of the smart contract source code or so, just to go through this, just drop us an email at was it not? Was it that?
Yeah, I know what I think about.
And then you can actually run the same exercise as well. In the end, everything is already on Ropsten, everything is on IPFS. And right now we're developing some like small improvements for the UI and the interface, and eventually we would like to work on like many other features and completely open source this, so anyone can actually start posting their stuff in a decentralized way.
Yeah. Any other questions, feedback?
When we click on unpublished, what's happened?
So,
Good question.
I think for that we will need.
You want to look at the presentation?
Yeah.
Maybe you can also show the button here, so you want to.
So, how familiar are you with linked lists? So, imagine like a chain which is formed out of rings. Like, what happens once you remove a ring? To keep the chain as it is, you have to connect things together. But in this case, we're having this immutable system where we cannot just change the. Like, if you split things, like let's assume we have rings. Oh, actually, we have a blackboard. Why not?
Wait, we have the, look at that, use the diagram, right?
Yeah, diagram? Sure.
That's the one, it's useful to visualize like this.
So basically, we have pointers and pointers showing out content. So as an example, what you can do, if you want to remove this content, you basically create a new pointer, which is showing like the things on the top, and the pointer, instead of showing this, it shows that. And eventually, in IPFS, if you don't provide services, or if people don't host it, the system forgets it. So you basically rewrite the chain through pointers, and then forget about that. And this is all handled by the interface. And the same thing happens once you edit things, right? Because in IPFS, if you edit things, things are immutable. So address of everything changes. So you need to rewrite some parts of this. Therefore, you need to rewrite, like, there is a part of the chain until the point where you want to make a change. And you have to basically rewrite all the pointers above it, at least in the current implementation. But pointers are really like small blocks, like small JSON files basically on IPFS, so it's not really super hard. But in a really long chain, that might be an issue, and we might actually provide like better ways of doing it. But in the end, you're not mutating the content, you're kind of rewriting the whole blog in a way.
But does that mean that the old content is
still on IPFS? I mean, technically, if something is on IPFS, as long as people serve it, it will always be there. But the thing is, is it visible? Or how does people serve that? In case where kind of people stop caring about that content and forgetting about it, then nobody will be able to access it, right? So you unpublish things, you don't delete things. You basically get rid of the visibility in the protocol layer and the interface layer, and eventually it gets forgotten. But it's sort of like the real life, right? If you see some sort of a content, as long as you remember it, it's there. But the moment you forget it, it's gone. So IPFS kind of works like that a little bit as well.
So basically the content remains in the blockchain, just the visibility can be switched on and off.
The content lives on IPFS, so this is a two-layered solution. We basically have a content sitting on IPFS, and we have the blockchain to figure out like where the content is partially. What we do is basically we kind of erase its address from this whole system, so nobody knows where it is anymore.
But can I put it back once it's gone for some time?
I mean, if you have the content on your local computer, you can still upload it to IPFS.
Okay.
I mean, in the end, we don't care what's inside the content or so.
Is there any risk of you losing that connection between the data and your application at some point?
The thing is, we do everything in, like, we orchestrate things together. So as long as you use a correct implementation, you won't be, because it's quite straightforward. You make a change, and then you update it. So is it like even if you lose track of it, the old chain kind of lives there until it's completely forgotten.
If you don't know the address, if you lose it, if it's not written on your
Smart contract.
or it
Yeah.
was written, there was some error, you will lose the contact.
But I mean that's how it works, right? So first we need to upload things into IPFS, then we get an address we can put into Ethereum. And in Ethereum, if a transaction fails, it doesn't reset the state lives as it is. So a failure of a smart contract run wouldn't change the state. The old state, therefore the old form of the whole block will continue to exist.
If there's any other feedback or something like that, I mean, again, feel free to shoot more questions if you want. But also, it's something we are constantly trying to improve. So I think it's a key thing. Feel free to email us, hit us up in any kind of way. It's also a very organic product like that. So
One question.
yeah.
Since editing has cost,
Yes.
right? I just did one. I paid 3 cents or something like that. So do you have any plans to optimize this in some way, like bulk costs or stuff like that?
And these are all possible. It's basically depends on the smart contract implementation, how costly it is. As an example, just before us, there were some talks about running Wasm on Ethereum. Basically, it will have like lower gas costs for this particular stuff. So why not? As an example, if we port this thing in a way that it consumes less gas, sure, we will. I mean, we would really like to do it because it helps the user. It's easier for them to post at that moment. But as an example, using like a second layer solution or so, in the end, that's something we really think about, because in the end, it's like putting a sponsor between you and the infrastructure at that point. And what happens if you base everything on that layer and then something happens to that layer? I mean, this is something ideological. It can work, of course.
Yeah.
There's nothing preventing it from working with another thing. You can run the whole thing on a side chain or whatever, so there is almost like no cost at all. But this is the choice we made for this implementation.
One more question. Do you consider using DOT protocol?
Actually, we evaluated that, and that's why actually the protocol itself can run with multiple storage layers. But with that, it's harder to implement all this like mirroring stuff also, because in that, by default, no node serves the other node's data. There is no like a layer, there is no way to easily distribute things. You need to explicitly distribute things for a certain period of time or so. But we have some plans to actually try to make this work on that. And also that we were not able to find like really accessible public gateways. That was another problem. Because the beauty of the thing we have right now, basically I can open any browser, like any modern browser without any Web3 implementations or so, but using public gateways or like maybe using like local nodes, whatever you have, we can basically provide the content. So this is a permalink which will work in almost any browser. You don't need any extensions because there is some public infrastructure which allows you to access this data.
Do you guys plan on running your own IPFS gateway now?
Yes, eventually, but to be able to do that, so we were talking about blacklisting particular content just for our like gateway to this protocol. We need a way to figure out blacklisting it from that gateway as well.
Yeah.
So we need to do some work on it, but right now we're focusing on using the public stuff. But definitely, also we run a small node which mirrors the content there, so most of the stuff is accessible almost all the time right now.
You earlier talked about you use Kubernetes for orchestration.
Yeah, for dealing with our IPFS node as an example.
Can you talk about this very briefly, like
So,
how you use it?
I mean, we have a small server, like we have a small app which runs like an embedded IPFS server, and we basically deploy it to like various cloud environments via Kubernetes to kind of maintain this IPFS node, deploy it with any sort of like a Git push or whatever. Just like mostly tooling stuff. But it's this simple container with like Node.js and IPFS running in it and basically mirroring everything in Pheme. But that's just like a temporary solution which we will need to evaluate. But I mean, to prevent some sort of utilities, you will need to use all the infrastructure, but you can also run it in your home. We also have some plans to basically, I mean, what happens if we put all the stuff into a Raspberry Pi? It will keep on working. So we will definitely try that at a certain point. So,
If there's no specific other questions, I mean, of newcomers, of course, feel free to hit us up and ask about it. Because we did a little explanation about how the whole thing works, we did a whole workshop around people posting content themselves. So we basically had people from the workshop post their content in here. Yeah, feel free to hit us up just to ask about what we were talking about earlier. And if there's nothing else, this will be the end of this session at this point. Thanks very much for coming, everybody, people are here now. And yeah, again, if there's anything you want to know about the platform, we're here. So we'd love to hear any feedback you have. And we'll get some lunch.
thanks.
Thanks very much.